Welcome to the very first lesson of Miss Gigi's Interactive Classroom. Today's lesson is going to be about math. On Friday in class we talked about and learned about multiplication of integers. In this lesson we're going to extend on that and we are going to focus on multiplication patterns. So if you guys haven't already, please turn to page 46 in your book and we're going to be going over investigation 3.2 in this lesson. At the top of the page, the book asks you to look at these equations and write down what patterns you see. So I want you guys to all take a second and pause this video and look for the patterns you might see amongst these equations. There's no right or wrong answers. Once you've written down your patterns that you see through these equations, set them aside and let's move on to A1, which directly connects to looking for patterns. The question asks, what do you notice about the products of these equations as the number multiplied by 5 decreases by 1? Think about it for a second. What you may have written down in when you're looking for patterns, and what is one of the possible answers to this question is that the product decreases by 5 every time the number that's multiplied by 5 decreases by 1. A2 asks you to predict the following. What happens when you multiply 5 times -1, 5 times -2, 5 times -3? So take a minute to pause this video and write down what you think the answers are and explain your reasoning. So the answer to these three equations are 5 times -1 is -5, 5 times -2 is -10, and 5 times -3 is -15. To some of you this may make sense, and to some of you it may not. So let's go into a little more depth of why these answers are negatives. So I tried to make you guys a little handy dandy number line that you may not be able to see that well right here. But at my number line I started at 25. And as we saw in the pattern at the top of your book, if you want to get that out to reference, that 5 times 5 is 25. So we multiplied 5 by 5. That's where I'm getting the times 5 sign. It's 25. And as we said in our pattern above, when the number you multiply by 5 decreased by 1, our answer decreased by 5. So on the top here in pen, I did an arrow that says -1, because that means the number that represents the number we're multiplying by 5 goes down by 1. So there, 5 times 4 is 20. And like we said before, the answers are decreasing by 5. So as we get way over here, 5 times 0 is 0. So what's next? If you take away -5, if you subtract 5 from 0, you're at -5. So here I put 5 times -1 is -5 because it's going along with the pattern. As you keep subtracting one from the number that you're multiplying by 5, your product will continue the pattern and your product will decrease by 5. Let's move on to B1 now. B1 asks you to complete these following equations. Think about what we just went over in part A and apply that knowledge. Take a minute to pause the video and write down your answers. Remember, no calculators. No calculators. That's cheating in this lesson. No calculators. As most of you hopefully got, but it's okay if you didn't, -4 times 5 is -20, -4 times 4 is -16, -4 times 3 is -12, -4 times 2 is -8, -4 times 4, -4 times 1 is -4, and -4 times 0 is 0. Some of you, once again, that may make sense. To others, maybe not. So let's look at it a different way. Once again, I tried to draw you a beautiful number line, but let's be honest, it's not so beautiful. So let me try to move it a little closer here. Okay, so once again, this is all about patterns, this lesson. So we're looking for patterns. So hopefully you guys picked up on a pattern by completing that table So in problem B2, the question asks, what happens to the product when the numbers you multiply by 4 get smaller? So this is going along the lines of picking up patterns for these equations. So I try to draw a number line, like I said, not so pretty number line, to help you guys see these patterns in a more visual way. So here we go. So over here we start at the number line -20, because as we saw that -4 times 5 is -20. So once again, the green up here, the -1 represents that the number we're multiplying by -4 is decreasing by 1 each time. So -4 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 and so on. And then down here, as you can see, the pattern you hopefully picked up on is every time the number decreases by 1, the product decreases by 4. So -4 times 5 is -20. -4 times 4 is -16. So we added 4. So just like we did in our last investigation, we can put that, hold on, you guys can't see that color very well. We can put that, so double check that, we can put it in an addition problem. So -4, -20 plus 4 gives us -16. So that's how we can check our pattern. And then -16 plus 4 gives us -12. So we're moving those 4 spaces every time the number we're multiplying by -4 decreases by 1. Alright, you guys, you're doing great. We're almost through this. Let's move on to B3 now, which asks, predict and explain. What in the world is -4 times a -1? Take a minute, predict and explain, and write down in your notebook what your answer is to this problem, and then let's continue. So maybe some of you got this and maybe some of you didn't, but a -4 times a -1 is a +4. What? How are two negatives multiplied by each other positive? Didn't we learn before that a negative plus another negative number is a negative answer? Nope, not with multiplication, folks. A negative number times another multiplied by another negative number will give you a positive answer. Who would have thought? Once again, let me try to show you this in a different way on my not so beautiful number line. I think it will be easier if you guys see this visually to understand the patterns. So, while you guys were figuring that out, I added a little something. So, like we said in our pattern before, as the number we multiplied by 4 decreased by 1, we added 4 to our answer. So it's like the problem we did in the beginning, except we're going the opposite direction. So when we're doing the multiplying 5 by a number, we're moving this way down on the number line. And now we're moving back up towards 0 and getting bigger. So once we get here, we get to -4 times 0 is 0. So what happens when we minus 1, we subtract 1 from 0? We do -4 times -1, which was the question. We're keeping along with the pattern, where the number multiplied by 4 is decreasing by 1. 3, 2, 1, 0, now -1. So to follow the pattern, that means the answers to these equations has to keep being added by 4 has to keep added on. So 0 plus 4 is +4. So therefore, it all matches up right here. -4 times -1 is +4 because we're taking 1 away from 0, which when the number we're multiplying by 4, which is following the pattern. So there, we're adding 4 down here, which gives us a +4. Stumbled on my words a little there, but hopefully this visual will help you a little more to see. We're following patterns. So if it's not making sense to you, just think of this number line. Think about how we're progressing, how we're getting bigger. As the number we're multiplying by -4 gets smaller, our answers are actually getting bigger. I know, it's kind of backwards thinking. So like I stated before, if you have a negative number and you're multiplying by a negative number, like we have here, -4 and -1, your answer is going to be a good old positive answer. All right, to bring this lesson to near end, I'm going to walk you guys through a few parts of C. So, in C1A, it asks you guys to multiply 7 times the -8 times the -3. Some of you, remember, no calculator, brain power, okay? Some of you guys are going to help you through this. So this is my guidance. So I hope you guys can take this and learn to apply it by yourselves. So, this may look scary at first, but let's just take this part by part. So first of all, let's do 7 times 8. Anyone? Guys, write this down along with me, or if you know it, skip ahead, or if you're struggling a little bit, pause it after each step so you can write it down. So I know from my math facts that 7 times 8 is 56. And I know from what we just talked about that a positive number times a negative number will give us a negative answer. So 7 times a -8 is a -56. And then multiply. We have to multiply that times -3. So, knowing my handy-dandy math facts, I know that 56 times 3 is 168. I think. Call me out if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure that's right. But what do we have for signs? Let's think back to what we learned about before. A rule we have, when you have a negative number times another negative number, you're going to get a positive answer. So I know that's going to be a positive 168. So -56 times a -3 gives us a positive 168 for our answer. If you guys need to, pause it or rewind and look over those steps again. I'm going to move on to the next one. So let's take this one in parts again. I know that 12 times 5 is 60. And I know when you multiply negative number by negative number, our answer is going to be positive. So that is a positive 60. Now let's take that and multiply it by -4. I know that 60 times 4 will give us 240. And I also know that rule of thumb is a negative number times a positive number gives us a negative answer. So positive 60 times -4 gives us an answer of a -240. So, if that was too fast for you, that's okay. You can remember, you can go back, rewind, and look over this again. I'm going to let you guys do the third question that has to do with fractions on your own, because I hopefully gave you the tools to be able to do that. Hopefully you have math facts down well enough to be able to do that. However, for the last question in this section asks, how do the patterns you found in this problem, C, talking about these, and you can just think about this investigation as a whole, how do the patterns you found in this problem compared to the algorithm from problem 3.1, which we did on Friday? This, ladies and gentlemen, is where I'm going to leave you to think about and come to school on Tuesday with being prepared to answer that question. Remember, these aren't supposed to be trick questions. I want you to problem solve on your own. So use the tools from this lesson and what you learned on Friday to compare these two algorithms. And if you need to, you can always go back and rewatch any of this. I hope this video helped you. Guys, it's my first one, so I know it's a little shaky, but I hope you guys all learned something today, and I can't wait to see you guys when you come back to school. Have a good day.